Good morning, Todd. I think it's a little after 9 a.m. Sydney time.
Morning, Chip. How are you going? I assume it's the reverse over there.
It is. It's evening over here. We've gotten snow, but it's starting to warm up. Are you starting to cool off yet, or are you still in midsummer's dream?
It's high 20s again today. Sun's just about to break through. It's going to be another beautiful day,
Well, every day is in Sydney, right?
most days.
Most days. Well, really appreciate you spending some time today. Looking forward to chatting a little bit. I'm going to head down the road a little bit of learning some more specifically about you. Love to hear about the practice, love to hear about the firm. So with that, boy, 23, 24, 25 years. How long at Man Judd?
13.
Okay.
And thanks for the opportunity, Chip. I really appreciate it. Obviously, cherish the relationship we're building over the last year and a bit. Even though Raymond's only been part of HLB for a short period, it feels like a lot longer. Yeah, but for me, yeah, 26 years on pure restructuring and solvency. I haven't been tainted by doing audit or tax or any of those other sort of things. Started with boutique firm Ferry Hodgson, 8 years there, then across to Deloitte for 8 years in their restructuring team, and then came over for the opportunity at HLB to continue to build the practice that a couple of the other senior guys have built and now taken over.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's there's a lot of recovered auditors in the restructuring world. So I'm glad to hear that you're not one of them. I am. So I have been through a lot of counseling and all that, but I'm officially all consulting now. So I hear what you're saying. So you've been kind of a little spot, big spot, and now middle spot, right?
Yeah,
What do you find as far as the capabilities? My sense with what you do there is that you guys have the ability to do pretty much everything the big guys do without the 1,000 person bench, but the culture and frankly the billing rates of not the big guys.
yeah, we do find that and particularly at the moment, we're landing a lot of work where people need a solution or as part of a process, and they come to us because we're the cost effective and can get things done that as part of a larger team. We play nicely with others, so we tend to find a solution in a lot of the ways through things. So yeah, it is. We're in a very strong niche, and there's a couple of other guys who are at the same level in different firms, and we find that yeah, there's a lot of requirement for what we do, where there's that understanding, capability, and experience, but not necessarily yes the structure of the larger firms where they have requirement to deploy large teams and they have larger charge out rates. So our rates and our approach, which is largely partner director driven, so we get on the tools and get things done.
Yeah, the we call it the executive presence in the field, where it's the leaders that are out there most of the time. How about some of the industries you've been in? I've got on my list here property, construction, retail, hospitality, but some newer things, fintech and cryptocurrency too. What else did I miss?
We obviously do a little bit of mining.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, and we also do some ESG things. We're looking at a couple of ESG issues at the moment around solar farms and all of those issues. And I know America's been through that sort of investment phase where everybody wants to do ESG things, and then some rationalization comes through. And I think we're following along those lines now. But we still had Victoria shut down for 6 hours when one of the coal-fired power generators failed this week. So there's still a lot of issues around all of that that's going to happen. And then my first role was mainly hospitality, so uh, that's sort of coming back around here as well. There's a lot of coffee shops and restaurants that are struggling, particularly in Sydney, where it's a very finicky sort of market. But the Mexican takeaway joints all seem to be flourishing.
So, obviously coming from the US, the coffee culture in Sydney blows, I mean, other than Italy, you blow everything else away. So it's hard to imagine the coffee places not doing well. I've also had Mexican food there, and it is hard to imagine them doing well, honestly. So you'll have to educate me in how things are going now. How about man? Every U.S. hedge fund collapse has a requisite Perth mining company with Brazilian gold operations. It's just in every single one. Do you guys get across the geography of Australia, or are you mostly on the Sydney Brisbane side?
Well, right now I've got a mine up in Northern Territory near Alice Springs,
Okay.
about 200 k's out of Alice Springs. It's a garnet mine, so non-precious. It's more of a cleaning and for specialized cutting tools. So that's we've had that for a while. We're hopefully trying to get rid of that now. It's got some issues around it. We've obviously got we got proposals out for jobs up in Queensland, and we have guys up in Queensland who we used to work with, who we deal with, and part of the HLB team up there is a restructuring guy as well. Melbourne traded, what would you describe it, a fintech in Melbourne through an administration project and a process and a restructure. Perth, we spent 3 or 4 months on 2 or 3 projects a couple of years ago. We've got one at the moment that we're looking at, which is restructuring a mining business over there. And we also interact strongly with our WA insolvency guys over there. So we have a presence on the ground that we've utilised as well. But a lot of these things, as you know, when you're getting your hands dirty and you're on site, you just got to get there to understand who the people are and be able to massage the deal so that you're providing value to your client.
Indeed. I know you are a go-to resource for a couple of folks I've met at least so far that are some of the big hedge funds, venture capital. Where else do you get a lot of your referrals to? Who else are you a trusted advisor and first stop shop for?
A lot of it's conflict work. So we do get a lot of work, a fair bit of work out of some of the larger firms from the guys I used to work with, and their teams that have now progressed, the other mid-tier firms, and obviously our lawyer network and accountants network. Then there is HLB network that we do get some referrals through. A lot of the international stuff at the moment that we're working on is closed down and corporate closure of local branches, and because there's restructures going on around the world. So they're nice pieces of work to be able to work through and be very cost effective with, to be able to say, let's look at it differently rather than just trying to put a cost to this thing. Let's see if there's some opportunities in there.
Fantastic. So every restructuring person that I know who's done it for very long has got at least one or two favorite stories that are fit for public consumption. What comes to mind for you?
Look, there's in terms of public consumption, I think another mining job where we were restructuring a mining job and the proposed incoming chairman didn't like the attitude where we were requiring a vote in a creditors meeting and threatened to take me outside and headbutt me. But we managed to have a cuddle at the end of that after we got it through, and he understood that corporate governance wins the day. This the same thing. It's the same sort of things that you have a lot of these times where you have these meetings and these battles with people, and everything gets emotional, and there's somewhat of a misdirection of the emotion towards us, and we just need to be able to be comfortable that we are executing a process and a structure, and eventually everybody comes back around. But we have had things go missing. We have had all sorts of things. I think we had a big settlement check on a installment of a large transaction of over $100 million, and the check went missing when it got back to the office. It was actually jammed underneath in somebody's drawer where it had been locked up to. But that caused 15 minutes of panic. All of those type of things, and just never. It always is surprising, and all of the industries are different. All the people are different, and it's part of the attraction to me is that you actually
Yeah.
get in there and you get to treat people with respect and just be honest with them. And that's yeah, I don't have as many stories as you where I get chased around as much. We've obviously had the threat. We all get threats and all those type of things from people who don't like what we're doing, but I don't have as many of those, and I have a few others which are probably not good enough for public consumption.
Fair enough, fair enough. So, you talk about the variety and the figuring out things because every circumstance is different. It's different because of the facts and circumstances. It's different because of the people that are involved and the pressures and
Timing.
timing, all of those sorts of things. Uh, that's oftentimes been a source of stress when corporate training officers want to put together the checklist of how to train people. How have you found development? What have you personally done to help get the teams coming along to deal with what comes?
As you know, there's only really one way to do it, and it's to actually get them to the experience of being on there and being part of the team. And sometimes we will drag people into the team just so they have been part of it. But one of my he's now got his own sort of family business because he's moved out with them. One of my old guys was sat in a meeting where we got extremely um, aggressively, robustly discussed about some stock on a retail matter that we weren't going to pay for. And once everybody had vented, we calmed down and said, right, so what have you got? What are you going to do with it? Let's talk about whether we can work something out commercially. And at the end, or 2 days after 2 days of discussions and meetings, we actually did agreed something to be able to buy the stock, which was branded with our brand, to be able to put it into a warehouse sale that we were putting together to sell through. So we actually got them their money back on that and a little bit of profit. And that creditor is now one of my clients who comes to me for advice on all of these things because the commerciality of it is the major aspect, right? You find those
Yeah,
solutions in those timings if you actually sit down, you can think about it. And everybody's willing to give you the information. The worst thing is where you're trying to find out a solution and nobody will give you the information, because as you know, we're making decisions on the basis of what we have anyway, which is generally incomplete. But that's where your gut feel and your experience helps you actually work through it, and you talk about it and you come up with an option.
yeah, it's one of those things. I agree with you. The only real way to do it is get tossed into the swimming pool. It's hard to get lessons. Well, let's switch a second and talk more about the wider practice. Maybe start off with where do you have physical presence? What offices do you have in restructuring folks in?
So we have restructuring teams in Western Australia. We have a restructuring individual in Brisbane, and we're in Sydney. But obviously, we travel. We also have a network of people that we can utilise who are consultants and experts in each of the other states. And Northern Territory, we obviously head up to, and we feel like we need to be hot. Uh, I've done work in Tasmania. It's a lovely part of the world. Generally down here, it's the same for you, I'm sure. Have laptop, will travel.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the corporate insolvency services that you guys offer. Uh, I always think about receiverships, of course, and we always think about bankruptcy, but what else do you have from the corporate side?
So we do the voluntary administration process as well, which is our effective version of Chapter 10, Chapter 11 to be able to work through and restructure. And that is extremely flexible. So we use that a lot on certain things. And we also do liquidations, either solvent liquidations, which we do a lot for corporate close downs, and creditor liquidations or court appointed liquidations as well. At the moment, we're doing a very large matter, which I can't talk to you about, which is we've been appointed by the body down here, and that is working through a major investigation phase. So happy to talk about that once we get through it. There's all of those type of appointments. There's also down here you can have a provisional liquidation. One of my network guys is appointed to $1 billion property fund,
Mm,
which is in provisional liquidation because the two main protagonists at the top of it can't agree on a funding structure going forward.
mm.
So they're gradually going through an unwind of those. So the good thing about it is, and then we obviously Australia respects Unistrail most of the time. And we do like, I think there's common among practitioners down here. We do like the idea of the restructuring officer in the Caymans because it's similar to the way we sort
Yeah,
of
yeah,
do it. The difference probably down here is that lawyers have advisory roles rather than the primary role, which
yeah.
is more like the receivership sort of structure, which is probably not too bad because I do find that as much as the restructuring lawyers are pretty good down here, the numbers still aren't one of their stronger bits. And when we get to dividend distributions and calculations, it does need that accounting sort of base.
It's
But
an
I'm
inter
biased.
I'm in the same bias spot you are. It is interesting around the world the different spots where the appointments are taken by numbers folks or by legal folks. And I suspect that there'd be strong opinions if we had a little panel here. But how about personal insolvency services? What do you guys do for individuals?
So we do Chapter 10, which is a compromise. There's a couple of other compromise mechanisms down here, and then there's full bankruptcy. So Barry, who you've met, Barry Taylor, he's been doing this for longer than I've been alive. So he's done monster and worked on monster bankruptcy. So he's the one we go to with all of that, and we've got a team that specialises just in doing that. And they, I think the interesting thing is the volume of that has gone up in the last sort of 6 months, but not necessarily in larger sort of it's small 60
Mhm.
grand sort of bankruptcies. It's just people just sort of giving up.
Gotcha, gotcha. Interesting. So that's Barry. We probably was appropriate. We started with him as what we call the most veteran member of the team, the sage wisdom. Who else should we talk about from the squad?
Matt Hocking is a liquidator as well. He's our emerging star. He's working on a couple of major projects at the moment, so he's and working on some other things in his private life. But he's our next sort of development, and we're spending a lot of time on him. And there's a couple of other younger guys who are in our management team who are really pushing us along. Yeah, I mean, I know I heard you talk with Marco recently, and we're bringing through a new system for us as well, which will cause it has its teething problems,
Mhm.
but will create some automation opportunities. And we obviously have an office overseas as well to give us some capacity because, as you pointed out, it's not necessarily easy to be able to train people and get people at all the times. You need some flexibility.
Yeah, it's no question. I mean, it's always an issue when you have to ramp up fast, right? You work really hard to get the big gig, then the big gig comes, and sometimes they come in multiples.
Yeah.
Yep.
And before I forget, and then we've got Andrew Mulcahy, who's works with me, who used to be at the NRL down here and inside the bank. So he's more of a pure restructuring guy. So he doesn't we drag him across the line every now and then, but he likes to stay outside of the insolvency sort of thing.
Fantastic. So when you think about the broader resources for the firm, we probably should talk about, the variety of things Mann Judd does. So you've got offices for the general practice beyond just what the insolvency group gets in the middle of. Where else is the overall firm at?
So this national firm keeps growing, and we're pretty much everywhere, all the major cities, and then some of the other cities. We have a large office that sits in Lismore, and they're a associate member. They have a very strong audit practice and a business advisory service. There's a major office in Brisbane, and they are a very good, well developed cross purpose firm. The same with Melbourne, the same with Adelaide, and Perth is obviously it runs a lot of audits for some reason there's mining companies over there.
Yeah,
They
I've heard
seem to
that.
need a few of those.
I've heard that.
So there's a lot of mining companies over there, and they run a very good audit practice for that. We obviously in here in Sydney or New South Wales we have Wollongong as well. So there are some smaller offices, regional offices scattered through. Tasmania we have a reasonable presence. New Zealand is a good team, and then we obviously have a Fiji office as well,
Yeah.
which will all be catching up in May. I think on the Gold Coast this year for our
Okay.
Asia Australasia, we call it, conference. We'll see whether we can get you down and you can do your thing.
So love to visit the Gold Coast. I haven't worked my way there yet, but we'll see if we can
Have
get in
some
there.
wonderful golf courses there, Chip.
Well, I would expect with your hospitality background that you would have for work hit every golf course in Western or in
Not
Eastern
yet.
Australia. Not yet. Still working
Un-
at it.
unfortunately, work gets in the way of that. But my golf game does need a lot of work, so I will be apportioning some of my time to that over the next few years.
Gotcha. So I know one of the things that I think has really differentiated your group has been some of the work that Fiona's done with some of the business automation and whatnot. Talk just a little bit about the vision that you guys have for that, and it certainly is visionary.
Yeah, we invested in that at the start, what we perceive the start of automation. And Fiona's got a specific team, and she has responsibility internally to try and modernize all of our systems and try and find efficiencies and all of those things. So she goes through our firm in each of the divisions, generally on a quarterly basis, and will update systems, automate systems, and bring through changes to be able to reduce um, wastage,
Yeah.
make things automated better, and just improve reporting lines. So I think our wealth management team, which is expanding and growing, and I think we're getting close to $1 billion under management.
Hmm.
They've found 20 to 25% savings
Hmm.
in efficiencies, reporting, and consistency, and that's obviously important to their regime. Accounting and tax are obviously going through that, and a lot of the practical issues about how you obtain, for us, the audit information to be able to
Hmm.
put that into the system, save it down, have it all there so that it can tick boxes and get those things done rather than somebody having to sit there and click and click and click and click. And that's
Hmm.
and most of that is now done by robots. I have a robot, Anna, which sends me a monthly report of all the key indicators for our division. We have some interesting conversations with Anna where I ask her some questions and she says that's not my job. But uh, it's really good because it gives us consistency in those things, and these things develop over time as your systems
Yeah.
consider. And I think the next thing that we're up to is probably some larger considerations about whether what we need going forward as a business, and whether some of the programs we've been running for a number of years, as I'm sure you are, whether that's the right one or whether we really challenge ourselves and go, right, let's push out.
Yeah. No, it's definitely neat stuff. It's one of the things that differentiates y'all. I remember one of the times that I was there at one of the meetings, you were rolling out some onboarding, some AI and whatnot. It was just really neat to see, and I think especially with the generations coming on now, they're expecting that, right? They're expecting everything to be done on their phone. Won't, if you were in China, be on TikTok, but you probably can just use your iPhone in Australia still. Um,
Well, and look, all of the systems we're bringing through, it comes through with here's all the videos. So if you ask a question, it's not no, here's the video about here's the click through and all of those type of things. So it is a different way of learning. And there is that difference in the generations where the generations now really want clear, detailed information around how they're going to do things rather than go and have a go
yeah,
and figure it out. It is a different way of learning, and we're all still adapting to it because we're different generations.
yeah. Well, you're ahead of the curve, so it's fun to see. How about on the tax side? I know you've got a great tax practice. We interacted with you on some of your international clients' international needs, but what are some of the specific things to Australia?
Well, there's for investments down here, there's some capital gains issues, and there's withholding tax for overseas investments, particularly funding. But there are ways to sort of get around that, and it's important to just make sure that you set up the right structure. We're dealing with another subsidiary of an American company where they have global reporting
Hmm.
obligations because they're big enough, so that the 15% tax
Yeah.
aspect. So all of those things fall in that. And there's three or four of our partners who've got 15, 20 years plus of dealing
Mm.
with global issues, funds issues. We have a rather large funds management business,
Mhm.
tax and accounting, which is expanding. And on top of that, then we have obviously our private client business, which is generally where a lot of our money ends up now with, as you would know, with our wealth management as you go through the generational or the generation of it. And like 7 or 8 partners, we're probably one of the larger tax practices
Hmm.
outside of the big four and BDO.
No. And I suppose we should touch on the A&A side since it's there. Now you guys you're June 30 year ends, right? You're not calendar year?
We do both. There are both, depending upon the ownership structure. So if it
Okay.
is US listings or whatever else, but yeah, there is. It's vast majority is 30 June. So I sit amongst the audit team. We're in a corporate area, and generally they say we can't do anything after 30 June. Like they're boxed
Yeah.
out until
Yeah. Yep.
October, but then they're also boxed out around 31 March because of the 31 December year
Sure,
ends as
sure.
well. So we talk about audit being available about 4 days of the year.
So I understand this is, the powerful auditor lobby union has made it so that during summertime they're not busy. That's what I understand you saying, right? They've got the wintertime busy and then, as the fall kicks in, but they're good to go during the high time.
Look, we could talk about what busy actually is for a number of hours. Um, but yes, it is miraculous that they do seem to spend a little bit more time working from home during summer, and things are a little bit more relaxed. But it does get helter skelter. Particularly, I've had to work on a few going concern matters with them, and you're pushing deadlines, and it's almost like one of our matters.
Yeah, we should talk about the secondment programs just a little bit while we're there. I know that that's been a great source for your team. Talk just or for the firm. Talk just a little bit about how that works, and for those folks who may be abroad who are watching this, especially from the HLB network, who don't know much about it, it's a great chance to advertise.
Well, as you know, Chip, Sydney is a terrible place to come and spend 3 or 4 months. And the audit team, so my team gets trained in audit as well, so that we have some flexibility to be able to move through, particularly if they land some new work or if I have some other things that I need some assistance with. And I think going forward, you and I are probably going to need more audit sort of skills in what we're doing, because I think audit will be part of a process or a program. And it's 3 months down here, 4 months down here. We've had, unfortunately, we've had a few people who've come down and done it and not left, which caused uh, a bit of tension between the parties. But
Sure.
as part of the network, it's a really good thing to do. And the audit team's pretty good. They have a very good attitude. We have a pretty good attitude in terms of the firm. Thursday night drinks were on last night. So there was a speech given, and everybody across the firm. The table tennis table didn't come out yet, but I assume that'll come out shortly. And it's all about getting to know everybody and moving through, because we're a big business. We're 200 people now, and obviously with the flexibility you have, you don't necessarily see people all the time. But for anybody coming down here, they will be welcome with open arms. There's a good array of work to be able to do, and then you get, most of the time, I'd say, weekends in Sydney where you can roll around the place, work on your golf game, or go and see all the sites, including Bondi, if you really want to.
I don't know if 3 or 4 months is enough to see quite all the sites, but you definitely have a good start. All right, well, that's a great, I think, a great intro to you and the practice and the firm. I know you had a couple things you wanted to chat with me about, so we'll maybe transition to that. What's on your mind about the international web that we weave?
Well, I think from where I see, where do you see? I mean, you must see so much stuff coming out of the Caymans where there's going to be great opportunity over the next 3 to 5 years, because everything I see in a structured fund goes through the Caymans. And the appropriate entity to probably wind down is probably going to be there. So how do you think that's going to play out? And where should people be thinking about talking to you? Should they be coming and talking to you about structuring now and thinking about it before they get to that?
Yeah, so many people don't realize that the Cayman Islands, at least a couple of years ago, I think were the eighth largest banking center on the planet. They were there. A lot of money rolls through there. I haven't checked the latest stats, but it's going to be in that neck of the woods. The islands are a fairly small place. I think there's 35 law firms, maybe 20 accounting firms, and the money goes in there because it's a tax haven. There's no income tax. It's also a little bit of a estate planning haven, both from the identity of shareholders and also from just a little bit of more of a it's another step if you're trying to get at that money from someplace else. But it doesn't stay there, right? It goes into Cayman and then it gets deployed somewhere else. And so, what I'd tell you is that firstly, you have to understand what your options are in Cayman. And there's it's English law. There's very typical liquidator type actions where you've got creditors that haven't been paid for I think 90 days and it's not very much money, maybe 25, 30,000 US. They've got standing to file a winding up petition. Lots of times those winding up petitions are filed, almost speculatively to try to figure out what's going on because money goes into these investment funds in Cayman and story after story after story is no one knows what happened after he goes there. There's little reporting, it's flipped out into whatever, sometimes somewhat innocently, sometimes less innocently. And so the winding up process is started almost as a discovery tool to figure out what has gone on. Liquidators get appointed. There's, generally speaking, provisional liquidators that are appointed first. They've got relatively little powers that have a lot more to do around finding things out than doing stuff.
Same as it is down here.
Yeah, sure.
And is that because they've got straw directors up there as well? Is that the sort of theory?
Yeah, so those accounting firms I mentioned, they are the on-island directors for everybody. A large part of their revenue is coming from being the directors. Having a board meeting on the boat twice a year to say you did it, and those sorts of things. Maybe for 100 companies at a time, but just following through with what's required. And so you get in the winding up petition gets filed, and oftentimes it goes from provisional to official, and that's where the powers come in. Um, what's interesting about Cayman, though, is that generally speaking, those are people on island who get a number of appointments. They're not, running to take over a mine in Perth or a manufacturing company in Detroit. They need local resources, need local assistance for those sorts of things. So one of the first challenges usually for them is to figure out what a fund owns, maybe that owns it, maybe that's made loans to it. What are these various vehicles by which money has gone out, and what are their options under contracts or agreements?
Security.
Yep, and then what are their options legally in these different jurisdictions? And so, the first thing I always think about when I hear that someone's lent money into Cayman, and usually the story is we don't know what happened, right? There's no more communication, there's no dividends coming out, we don't know what's going on. The first thing to do is to get with one of a couple of firms in Cayman. And just like everywhere else in the world, you've got a couple of really, really big firms. In some cases, they need those resources and they suffer those costs. But there's a lot of great quality firms that are kind of in that middle group where they have usually people who've come from the big firms with all the same capabilities and knowledge, but lower cost. And so lots of times that's where these things start, unless again you're talking about something huge. But lots of times those are great spots for these things to start. You figure out what your options are. There's now a restructuring officer option which comes into play as well. But if you're coming from the creditor side, either an actual creditor or an unpaid investor who's a redemption creditor, then the winding up petition is the way to go. If you've got some internal power, then the restructuring officer's there. But really what that does is it gives you the opportunity to figure out where the money's gone from Cayman, which is the first step. The second step is figuring out, okay, if it's in Malaysia or Detroit or Sydney, what is it in? Is it in companies there? Is it in real estate? Is it in bank statements? And then, what are our options there? So
Or
there's
in the casino?
or in the casino. I mean, that happens too, right? The money's gone somewhere and it's gone, right? I mean, it's been
Yeah.
played in the slot machines or someone's been eating really well, for a number of years, and you see all of these sorts of things. Or they're in jurisdictions of really good protection. So Texas and Florida, for example, have got really good homestead exemptions. Um, if the money's you can break through it if it's really clearly fraud, but other than that, you can take out 10 million bucks, put it in your house, and nobody can get at it. It's just there. So that's really, where we start to really blossom as the network of HLB. I'm happy to help chat with people who need help in the Caymans or BVI or any of the Caribbean islands, because it's the same deal there. We see a lot of Chinese money that went through the BVIs, so there's an awful lot of Chinese investment that went that direction. But however it goes, you can work through there's a fairly small cast of characters on these islands that do the work, and so we can connect people with the right professionals there. And then based on where it is out in the world, we use the HLB network to try to figure out what the particulars we need to have. Sometimes you have a judgment, you bring it Australian judgment to Cayman. Sometimes you got to get the judgment in Cayman. You have to work your way through, and that also matters where it's going. If you're taking it someplace from Cayman that recognizes an Australian judgment, that's one thing. If you're taking it someplace that doesn't, you got to figure out what judgment the end place goes. So
And
it,
and we've largely mapped that out in that proposal that we sort of went through where
oh yeah,
we
yep,
almost
yep.
got there. So we've sort of got that plan ready to go and in place. And then obviously the next thing will be to chase the money and where most of it goes, which is the greatest country on earth.
Well, that's what we find an awful lot. Although it doesn't always stay there either, right? I mean, there's lots of money that goes to the U.S. and it keeps on trucking from there. It just depends on, how sophisticated these people are, how much running they
Or
want to
desperate.
do, or desperate, or accidental. I mean, sometimes they accidentally go to the right place or the wrong place. And there is, as there's time, there's expense, there's some willpower that you have to have if you're gonna keep chasing things, and you have uncertainty in the courts. The one rule I know about attorneys is that if they guarantee me they know what a judge is going to do, I know they're not telling me the truth, because no one knows, right? The courts rule on different things. They have sympathy or compassion sometimes on people that we have less compassion on. All of that comes into play.
But I mean, I look at it on the basis that going back to where you're talking about cost effective process to be able to at least identify where things have gone to, and then you've got the information to be able to make a decision
Yeah.
what you do from there, whether it's commercial, whether it's not, or whether you go, well, we don't know enough, we need to make the next investment to see whether we can actually find it.
Usually there's some sort of a duty to figure out what happened, right? And that's the first step. And that's where, as you and I work together, we operate in these tranches where there's a first step of trying to figure that out. What do we need to do to figure out what has happened? And then identify what our options are. Is someone recoverable? If they're not recoverable, it doesn't matter how easy or hard it is. There's no point. If they are recoverable, how hard is it going to be? What's the cost and the timing looks like? We know there's some jurisdictions in the world that are, 10-year processes for these sorts of things. And if it's enough money, you fight your way through that. But not many people have the patience to do that for small sums.
Well, I think Barry had that example back on Burns Phillip where he had to take Argentinian government bonds in exchange for a plane.
Hmm.
And then you're worried about whether these bonds have any value. And I mean, Argentina's economy is not exactly known as being one of the stable ones.
Yep.
And he had to work through that relatively quickly and work with the judge down
Yep.
there. And that took, just to get a simple deal like that done, that took 18 months.
Yeah. Absolutely. Timing is a big thing, and again, you find out, there are plenty of great jurisdictions where judges are fantastic and they're qualified. There's other places where they're electable, and that doesn't always have to do with whether they're qualified or not. And again, that's part of the HLB network, though, is able to do homework on understanding what the jurisdiction that you're in. Every jurisdiction has its quirks and foibles and personalities.
Well, we've got the UK guys helping us on one bankrupt where we have some assets in the UK and they're able to be it because it's simple for them. That's what they do. being able to call them and say, what would this be worth? Is there any security on it? What's the value of security? And then you can work out commercially whether you do anything with it straight away.
You bet. You bet. Yep.
And
And that's the power of the network.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And obviously then you got the tax implications over the top, being able to actually work through that.
Yep.
And the other way I look at it is we have a lot of businesses going to the US because that's the transition they go through to get into a larger market to be able to
Yep.
get access to certain levels of funding. So being able to have somebody trusted who actually understands where they're coming from to be able to go over there and set up their structure properly for them, because we see it a lot where we get to have to wind down a structure which is either flawed tax wise or security wise or just overall, or there's a corporate divorce gone on between two parties or a personal divorce gone on between two
Yep.
parties,
Yep.
and the structure needs to change. And that's where I think the other thing we'll see more and more of that is being able to work through the chain. That's where HLB has that sort of advantage where we can go, okay, let's talk about the global plan, and then we'll bring in these guys to actually look at it and analyze it.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Well, Todd, we've covered a lot of ground today. Really appreciate your time, and I hope that your Friday goes well. That the weekend has better weather than the week did.
We'll see. We'll see. I'll go back to my mining jobs.
Haha, good enough.